The Vrikari were proud hunters. They walked on 4 powerful legs across the frozen plains of Kethos 7. Their bodies were covered in thick silver fur. Their eyes glowed pale blue in the darkness. They lived in packs of 20 to 30 members. Each pack had a den carved deep into the ice mountains. The dens were warm. The dens were safe. For 10,000 years, the Vrikari had slept together in these dens. The adults formed a protective circle. The cubs slept in the center, surrounded by warmth and the familiar scent of family. This was tradition. This was law. This was how things had always been done. Then the human came. Her name was Maya Chen. She was a xenobiologist from Earth. She had been assigned to study the Vrikari as part of the Galactic Union's first contact protocols. The Union had made contact with the Vrikari 3 cycles ago. The wolf-like aliens had shown remarkable intelligence. They had their own language, their own culture, their own history. But they had not yet developed space travel. The Union wanted to understand them better before offering technology exchange. Maya arrived alone. This was standard protocol. The Union believed that single researchers caused less disruption to primitive societies. Maya set up her small habitat module at the edge of Pakvaran's territory. The module was tiny compared to the massive ice dens. It had 1 room for sleeping, 1 room for research, and a small area for cooking. The Vrikari watched her from a distance for the first 3 days. Pack leader Kra was the first to approach. He was old by Vrikari standards. His muzzle had turned white. His eyes had grown wise. He circled Maya's module for a full day before finally speaking to her through the translation device she wore on her wrist. "Why do you come alone, small one?" Kreia asked. His voice was deep and rough. Maya smiled. She had been warned that Vrikari respected honesty above all else. "I come to learn about your people. I mean no harm to your pack." Kreia studied her for a long moment. Then he made a sound that the translator identified as laughter. "You are so small. You have no fur. You have no claws. How do you survive?" "We use our minds," Maya said. "We build things to protect ourselves." This answer seemed to please Kra. He invited her to observe the pack from closer range. Maya accepted gratefully. She spent the next several weeks watching the Vrikari hunt, eat, play, and sleep. She recorded everything. She learned their customs. She learned their songs. She learned the names of every pack member. There were 7 cubs in Pakvaran. They were curious creatures, barely reaching Maya's waist. Their fur was softer than the adults. Their eyes were brighter. They followed Maya everywhere she went. At first, the adult Vrikari would growl warnings whenever the cubs got too close to the human. But Maya was always gentle. She never made sudden movements. She always spoke softly. Slowly, the pack began to trust her. The cubs were named Vora, Keen, Set, Mira, Holt, Priya, and Little Ash. Ash was the smallest of the litter. He had been born with a weak leg that made him limp slightly when he walked. The other cubs sometimes left him behind during their games. Maya noticed this. She began to pay special attention to Ash. She would sit with him when the others ran off. She would tell him stories about Earth while he rested his tired leg. One night, a terrible storm struck Kethos 7. The winds howled like wounded animals. The snow fell so thick that Maya could not see her hand in front of her face. She sealed her habitat module and prepared to wait out the storm alone. But then she heard scratching at her door. Maya opened the door carefully. She found all 7 cubs huddled outside, covered in snow and shaking with fear. The storm had separated them from the adults during the evening hunt. They had become lost in the whiteout. Somehow, they had found their way to Maya's module. Come in, Maya said quickly. She pulled the cubs inside one by one. They were freezing. Their small bodies trembled against her hands. Maya wrapped them in thermal blankets from her emergency supplies. She turned up the heat in her module as high as it would go. She made warm broth from her rations and let them drink from her bowls. The cubs had never been inside a human structure before. They sniffed everything with wide eyes. Vora accidentally knocked over a stack of data pads. Keen tried to eat Maya's pillow. Set and Mira got tangled in her blankets. Holt and Priya explored every corner of the tiny space. Little Ash simply curled up against Maya's leg and refused to move. When the cubs finally calmed down, Maya realized she had a problem. Her bed was designed for one small human. There was no room for 7 Vrakari cubs. She tried to make a sleeping area for them on the floor using spare blankets and cushions, but the cubs would not stay there. Every time she placed them on the floor, they climbed back up and pressed themselves against her bed. Maya gave up. She squeezed herself into one corner of her tiny bed. The cubs arranged themselves around her in a warm pile of fur. Ash claimed the spot right next to her heart. The others fit themselves wherever they could. Maya could barely breathe under the weight of so many small bodies. But she did not complain. She lay there in the darkness, listening to the storm rage outside, feeling the steady heartbeat of 7 small aliens who had chosen to trust her with their lives. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, the adult Vrakari searched desperately for their missing cubs. They howled into the wind. They dug through snowdrifts. They feared the worst. When the storm finally ended, Kreia led a search party toward Maya's module. He expected to find the human dead. Humans were weak. Humans could not survive such storms. What he found instead changed everything. Maya opened her door to find 20 Vrakari warriors staring at her with shock in their glowing eyes. Behind her, the 7 cubs tumbled over each other, trying to see what was happening. They were healthy. They were warm. They were alive. Kra could not speak for a long moment. Then he lowered his great head in a gesture of deep respect. "You saved our children," he said. "You gave them shelter when the ice would have taken them. This debt cannot be repaid." Maya shook her head. "There is no debt. They came to me. I did what anyone would do." But Kra knew this was not true. He had studied enough about the galaxy to know that not all species valued the young of other races. Some would have turned the cubs away. Some would have seen them as animals, not worth saving. The human had risked her own comfort, her own safety, to protect children that were not her own. The cubs returned to the pack den that day. Maya watched them go with a strange sadness in her chest. She had grown fond of the little ones during those 3 days. She had learned their personalities, their quirks, their fears. She had sung Earth lullabies to help them sleep. She had told them stories about dogs, the animals from her world that looked almost like small Vrakari. The cubs had listened with wonder in their eyes. That night, Maya slept alone for the first time in days. Her bed felt empty. Her module felt too quiet. She told herself this was foolish. She was a scientist. She should not form emotional attachments to her research subjects. But hearts do not listen to reason. 3 nights later, Maya woke to scratching at her door. She opened it to find all 7 cubs sitting in the snow, wagging their tails hopefully. Behind them, at a respectful distance, stood Kra and several adult Vrakari. They made no move to stop the cubs. They would not sleep, Kreia explained. His voice held something that might have been amusement. Every night since they returned, they refused to enter the pack den. They sit at the entrance and cry for the human. Maya looked down at the cubs. They stared up at her with pleading eyes. Little Ash was already trying to push past her legs into the warmth of the module. "I do not understand it," Kreia continued. "The pack den is warm. It is safe. Their mothers and fathers are there. But they want only to sleep beside you." Maya knelt down to meet the cubs at eye level. "Why?" she asked them gently. "Why don't you want to sleep with your pack?" It was young Vora who answered, her voice small but certain. "The pack den is warm, but you are warmer. The pack den is safe, but you make us feel safer. You sang to us. You told us stories. You held us when we were scared. The pack den has many bodies, but it does not have you." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. She looked up at Kra. "I don't know what to say." Kreia sat down heavily in the snow. "I have led this pack for 15 cycles. I have seen many things. I have fought great beasts. I have survived terrible winters. But I have never seen anything like this. Our cubs have chosen you as their guardian. This has never happened before. It should not be possible. You are not Vakari." "What does it mean?" Maya asked. The old pack leader was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "Among our people, there is an old legend. It speaks of a time when the Vakari were not alone in the universe. It speaks of other beings, different from us, who would one day come from the stars. The legend says that we would know these beings were friends when our cubs chose to sleep beside them instead of in the pack den." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "And you believe this legend?" Kra looked at the 7 cubs who had already begun to pile into Maya's module. "I believe what I see with my own eyes. The cubs have chosen. That is enough for me." From that night forward, everything changed. Maya's tiny habitat module became an extension of the pack den. Every evening, the 7 cubs would leave their families and make the short journey to sleep beside the human. Maya expanded her sleeping area as much as she could. She built a small addition to her module with help from the adult Vakari. The new space was filled with soft bedding and warm blankets. The cubs thrived under Maya's care. They grew strong and healthy. Little Ash's weak leg improved with the special exercises Maya taught him. The other pack members began to visit Maya's module regularly. They brought her meat from their hunts. They taught her words in their language that the translator could not capture. They accepted her as one of their own. Word of this strange arrangement spread to other packs across Kethos 7. Many came to see the human who had earned the trust of Vakari cubs. Some were skeptical, some were hostile. But when they saw the healthy, happy cubs sleeping peacefully around the small alien creature, their doubts faded. If the children trusted the human, perhaps the human could be trusted. Maya continued her research for 3 more years. During that time, she became more than a scientist. She became an ambassador. She became a bridge between 2 worlds. When the time came for her to leave Kethos 7, she found that she could not go. Her home was no longer Earth. Her family was no longer human. The Galactic Union eventually established a permanent research station on Kethos 7. They built it around Maya's original module, which was preserved as a historical site. The 7 cubs grew into strong adults who became leaders in their own packs. They never forgot the small human who had sheltered them from the storm. They taught their own cubs stories about Maya Chen, the alien who had proven that family was not about species. Family was about love. Years later, when Maya was old and gray, she still slept surrounded by Vakari. The cubs of her original 7 would fight for the honor of sleeping beside her bed. And every night, as she drifted off to the sound of gentle breathing and warm fur pressing against her, Maya Chen smiled. She had come to Kethos 7 to study an alien species. Instead, she had found a home among the stars. The Vakari had a new legend now. They called it the story of the warm human. They told it to their cubs on cold nights when the storms raged outside. And always, the story ended the same way. Family is not about blood. Family is not about species. Family is about who you choose to keep warm in the darkness. And the cubs would look up at their parents with bright eyes and say, "Tell us again about Maya. Tell us about the human who was warmer than the pack den." And the story would begin again.